Hey guys, here we are with day 4 of the reproductive system. Still talking about the female reproductive system. Today we're going to talk about the menstrual cycle and what happens during that whole process. About every 28 days, a woman will go through 2 separate cycles called the uterine cycle and the ovarian cycle. And collectively, we refer to these 2 things as the menstrual cycle. There is a difference between the 2, so we're going to talk about that. The ovarian cycle is the time of month from when a woman is maturing and up to the point where she releases an egg from her ovary. So typically, a woman will release an egg during ovulation around day 14. So typically, you know, from like day 1 to day 14. An average woman's menstrual cycle is about every 28 days. Does that mean that everybody's is 28 days? No. Some women it's 30. Some women it's 25. It all depends on the woman. So these are just estimates or averages that are just kind of normal, or more common, I should say, instead of normal. The other part of the cycle is called the uterine cycle. This is what is happening throughout in the uterus throughout the menstrual cycle. As a woman's body is preparing for ovulation, the whole job of the reproductive system is for pregnancy, and so it's preparing for pregnancy. So the lining of the uterus is building up. And the purpose of that is that if it is that a woman is to get pregnant, that fertilized egg or that zygote will implant into that build-up lining, and that will create then a pregnancy. However, if the woman does not get pregnant, that inner lining is shed out through the menstrual cycle. So this monthly build-up, decay, and shedding of the uterine lining, that is all collectively known as the uterine cycle. Cycles typically have started in the teen years, but more and more common today is that girls are starting their periods at age 9 and 10, believe it or not. It's kind of crazy to think about that 9 and 10-year-olds, and maybe even a little bit younger occasionally, are getting their menstrual cycles for the first time. When that happens, that a woman is getting her period for the first time, or a girl, I should say, that is called menarche, menarche. It's kind of a funny word, but menarche. She will then continue to have her menstrual cycle until she is in her 40s or 50s. And at that point in time, she will no longer get her period. She will be going through what's called menopause. So you might hear somebody say, you know, an older woman, not older, 40s, 50s, you might hear them say, I'm going through the change, or something like that. But what they're referring to is menopause. And after they are completed with menopause, they will no longer get their periods for the rest of their life. So older people, when ladies are in their 70s and 80s, they're not going to be having their periods. As far as timing and what we consider the beginning versus the end, day 1 of the menstrual cycle is the first day of their period. Okay, so let me talk about the difference between menses and menstruation. Menses is the time period that she has her period, and menstruation is the actual shedding of the lining of the uterus. There is a difference between those 2 terms. As soon as the cycle is over, it starts back over. So the woman's uterus lining is shed when she has her period, and then it starts building back up and tries to prepare for if a pregnancy would result again the following month. As I mentioned, when the egg is released, it's called ovulation. That usually happens around day 14. When it is released, it moves down the fallopian tube. And remember, we said previously when we learned about these that this is usually the place where fertilization would occur, if fertilization is to occur. And if not, in about 2 weeks when she has her period, that egg that was not fertilized will shed with the lining of the uterus. Now, there are different phases of the menstrual cycle. The follicular or proliferative phase is the time between the end of her period and ovulation. During this time, the lining is building up, the eggs are maturing. The other phase is called the luteal or the secretory phase. It's the time between when she releases the egg in ovulation and the time she gets her period. The ovaries are doing what they need during this time. And, the uterine lining is beginning to shed at the end of that and that kind of thing. Now, the main difference between the reproductive system, well, there's many differences, but one of the differences between the male and the female is the differences between oogenesis and spermatogenesis. Remember in the male, when we talked about spermatogenesis, we talked about how once he reaches puberty, he will continue to be able to produce sperm. That is a big difference than what a female has. She goes through what's called oogenesis, which is when the eggs are maturing. By the time the female is about 4 months in gestation, so 5 months before a baby is even born, they'll have all the eggs they will ever have. But they still have 46 chromosomes, and they have to go through that process of meiosis in order to get them down to 23, in order for them to mature and that kind of thing. And that should do it for today. If you have any questions, let me know.